The moment the clip began circulating, it sent a jolt through media circles and royal watchers alike. Megyn Kelly, known for her blunt delivery and refusal to soften her words, looked directly into the camera and said what many critics of Meghan Markle have whispered for years but rarely articulated so forcefully. According to Kelly, the carefully curated image presented in Meghan's Netflix appearances was not just selective storytelling, but something far more troubling. She framed it as an illusion that had finally begun to crumble, and once that crack appeared, it was impossible to ignore what lay beneath. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Kelly opened her analysis by revisiting the promise Netflix originally sold to the public. The deal with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle was marketed as an unprecedented window into authenticity, truth, and unfiltered personal experience. Viewers were told they would see the real people behind the headlines, free from palace constraints and tabloid distortions. But Kelly argued that what audiences actually received was not raw honesty, but a polished performance that shifted depending on the audience Meghan was trying to reach at any given moment. In Kelly's view, the most disturbing element was not any single statement or emotional moment, but the pattern she claimed to see across multiple appearances. She pointed out that Meghan seemed to present different versions of herself within the same series, sometimes within the same episode. At one moment, Meghan appeared as a wounded outsider crushed by an uncaring institution, and at another, as a savvy media operator fully aware of her global influence. Kelly suggested that these personas were not naturally evolving expressions of a complex individual, but carefully selected masks designed to elicit sympathy, admiration, or outrage when needed. Kelly then turned her attention to the tone of the Netflix content itself. She argued that the series repeatedly positioned Meghan as the central moral authority, framing others through her emotional lens while rarely allowing independent perspectives to stand on their own. According to Kelly, this created an imbalance that felt less like a documentary and more like a long-form public relations exercise. She stressed that viewers were not being invited to evaluate events objectively, but were instead being guided toward a specific emotional conclusion. One of Kelly's strongest critiques focused on what she described as emotional manipulation. She claimed that the Netflix portrayals leaned heavily on dramatic pauses, selective editing, and emotionally charged anecdotes that could not be independently verified on screen. Kelly emphasized that while emotion has its place in storytelling, it becomes problematic when it replaces evidence or context. In her words, the result was a narrative that felt powerful but hollow, convincing on the surface yet fragile under scrutiny. As the discussion continued, Kelly addressed the broader cultural implications of what she called streaming-era mythmaking. She argued that platforms like Netflix have blurred the line between documentary and entertainment, allowing powerful figures to shape their own legends with minimal challenge. In Meghan's case, Kelly suggested, this environment made it possible to reinvent past events repeatedly, each time with slightly altered details that supported the desired narrative of victimhood or resilience. Kelly also highlighted what she saw as inconsistencies between Meghan's words and her actions. She noted that while Meghan frequently spoke about privacy, healing, and moving on, the Netflix project itself kept reopening old wounds and reigniting public conflict. Kelly questioned why someone allegedly seeking peace would continue to produce content that relied so heavily on revisiting grievances. To Kelly, this contradiction was not accidental but revealing. Another element Kelly described as disturbing was the portrayal of other people in Meghan's life. According to Kelly, the Netflix series often reduced complex relationships to simplified roles, allies or adversaries, with little room for nuance. She argued that this framing subtly encouraged viewers to assign blame without hearing full accounts. Kelly warned that such storytelling might feel emotionally satisfying, but it risks distorting reality and damaging reputations in ways that cannot easily be undone. Kelly then addressed the audience directly, suggesting that many viewers sensed something was off even if they could not immediately articulate it. She argued that the discomfort came from recognizing a mismatch between the language of authenticity and the mechanics of image control. The more Meghan insisted on her truth, Kelly said, the more some viewers began to question why that truth required such heavy packaging. In examining public reaction, Kelly pointed out that initial sympathy had gradually given way to skepticism. Social media commentary, critical reviews, and declining enthusiasm were presented as signs that the Netflix illusion was losing its grip. Kelly stressed that this shift did not happen because people suddenly became cruel or dismissive, but because repeated exposure allowed patterns to emerge. Once those patterns were visible, the narrative lost its emotional monopoly. Kelly was careful to frame her critique as media analysis rather than personal attack. She emphasized that public figures have the right to tell their stories, but audiences also have the right to question how those stories are constructed and sold. In her view, the problem was not Megyn speaking out, but the expectation that her version of events should be accepted without challenge simply because it was delivered with emotional intensity. As the segment drew on, Kelly expanded her argument to the broader celebrity media ecosystem. She suggested that Megyn's Netflix portrayal was a case study in how modern fame operates, where authenticity is marketed as a product and vulnerability becomes a branding strategy. Kelly argued that when vulnerability is curated, rehearsed, and monetized, it stops being purely human expression and becomes performance. Kelly concluded that the illusion she described was not created overnight, nor would it collapse instantly. Instead, she said it was eroding slowly, worn down by repetition, contradiction, and audience fatigue. The more Megyn appeared across platforms telling variations of the same story, the harder it became to maintain the sense of revelation that initially captivated viewers. In the final moments of her commentary, Kelly returned to the question of accountability. She argued that Netflix, as a platform, also bore responsibility for presenting content that blurred fact and feeling without sufficient context. She suggested that audiences should demand more transparency, not just from Megyn, but from all high-profile figures who use streaming platforms to define their public identities. As this discussion continues to ripple across media and public discourse, one thing is clear. The conversation is no longer just about Meghan Markle, but about how stories are told, who controls them, and how easily emotion can substitute for evidence in the digital age. Megyn Kelly's critique has reignited debate, not by offering new revelations, but by challenging viewers to look again at what they thought they understood. Now we want to hear from you.